الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Hazur, second questioner is Mr. Rado Torka. He is from former Yugoslavia, at present with BBC World Service. Mr. Torka.
MashaAllah.
Your Grace, I have great admiration for your community. Now, I have a very simple question, perhaps as old as mankind. Now, there are, say, 5 billion people in the world and many different beliefs. Now, how can one know that there is God and just one God at that?
Right, good. It's a very, very important, fundamental question, and as you said, it's time old. Because as the religion relates its own history, the denial began to appear at the very start of religion. The world was always divided into two, believers and non-believers. So it's a time-old question, but it is asked in relation to the present perspective. In the sense, as I understand, that now the world has advanced to a degree where man thinks he has command of nature. He can mold nature as he pleases by understanding it and harnessing it. And when that happens, then an arrogance automatically evolves from this. And that arrogance has been responsible for the spread of atheism in all the seats of knowledge, particularly in the West, but following that also in the East, everywhere. And that is why secularism is no longer an attitude of absolute neutrality. It has become an attitude of bias in favor of non-godly, non-believing forces. So much so that the scientists have themselves taken note of this. They are realizing that it has become a matter to be ashamed of for a scientist to openly admit that I have found evidence, scientific evidence, which leads to the belief in one master of the universe and only one master. So they suppress and continue to suppress such evidences out of fear that they will earn shame in their own community. A census was held in America on this particular issue of scientists of the world showing cold shoulder to religion or intentionally suppressing evidence, fearing that they will earn a bad name in their own community. And also the study was held to find out the trends among the scientists. And I was amazed to read that report. I don't remember exactly which paper, perhaps in Scientific American or some authentic magazine this report was published. If you want, I can trace it back. Now there it was noticed after a large investigation and exploration that in the beginning of this century almost all the scientists had turned atheists. There were very few exceptions. Gradually, with the passage of time, the trend is changing. Scientists, particularly the physicists, who were the foremost in leading the atheist movement in all the sciences, they are changing their attitude very pointedly in favor of God. And according to this consensus, 25% of important high-level scientists have no shame to admit that they believe in God and they have seen evidence in favor of God being the master of the universe. Now this trend was noticed some decades ago in half-mumbled statements where the scientists of the stature of Einstein saw things but did not have the courage to admit them in so many words. For instance, Einstein in one of his papers wrote that what we know as symmetry in nature is completely universal. There is no exception in that. There is perfect balance. And one wonders, how could it happen without there being one God? Now your question is related to this issue. One God, a God and one God alone. Now this was the effect of his declaration when protests were lodged against him by scientists. What have you done? Have you become a believer? And particularly when a letter was addressed to him from America of someone who was a committed atheist, he said, I respect you highly and you have done this and that, but do I hear rightly that you said this? Then Einstein, like a good politician, changed his view and started reinterpreting himself. He said, well, I said it as if there were a God, that sort of thing. But not that I believe in God, I'm with you. So that was the time when the things began changing. Now the world of science has advanced further. They are seeing positive evidence that religion was, after all, not to be rejected in toto as just as a cursory study of things. For instance, things are happening even in physics which are drawing the attention of scientists to such things they had rejected outright as unscientific. Now here let me explain further that the attitude of scientists has been divided into two perspectives, or two vantage points I should say. Some say we are just agnostics. We do not find any evidence of the existence of a conscious God. The others said there is no God. It's just human imagination. Like Einstein himself took this position later on. And he believed God to be the creation of human mind rather than mind to be the creation of God. Like the British sociologist, what was his name? Famous sociologist, Huxley. He was also, it seems to me after reading him, that he was a sort of admirer of, and a great admirer of Huxley. So he said this is the opinion of every educated person, every intellectual, and count me among those. But things began to change when some evidence began to appear which created shocks and shock waves. Einstein himself was one of those who had to admit it, though he kept quiet afterwards. And that evidence which first hit Einstein square on the head was the discovery of Big Bang. Now when he visited America in 21 or 22, when the Big Bang theory was just in the offing, what Einstein exclaimed in wonder and also in sort of exasperation, he said, do you mean that we will have to believe in God now? Now how could he relate the discovery of Big Bang to the issue of God's existence? Very few people understand that. But because there is not much time, let me skip this for the time being. There is a very deep, profound relationship between the discovery of the Big Bang phenomenon and the existence of God. A logical proof is found there. But that was the exclamation of Einstein's which is reported, registered, but then he never returned to this subject again. But things happen elsewhere otherwise as well. It was in America again that some scientists discovered by a chance a reported event which was amazing, which was to their knowledge completely contradictory to the principles of physics. That discovery was made by a farmer who was dragging his boat upstream with the help of a horse. Boat was harnessed onto the horse, and the horse was harnessed for the sake of the boat, and he was dragging the boat upstream. Now everybody knows that the pattern of movement created in water by a boat, whether it is still or otherwise, is something which is left behind the boat. It's impossible scientifically to accept that that pattern advanced beyond the boat and kept on moving on as if a boat was moving ahead of it. You see the triangular wave pattern which is created by the boat? This is what happened there. When this man turned a corner along the water edge and stopped there for a while, he was amazed to find as if the boat was moving ahead while it was stopping there, and it was leaving the same pattern exactly in the same shape ahead of the boat. So when scientists learnt of this, they experimented. And they discovered this phenomenon and named it soliton. And there they related it to religion in a strange way. They said whenever it was told to us by religious people that there is a soul, and soul is a bundle of energy, which even when separated from the body keeps its entity alive in that fixed bundle of pattern. We said it's impossible, you're talking nonsense. So we rejected the idea of soul. Now this phenomenon could not have happened if we rejected it in the case of the soul. So from then on we had to admit that the existence of soul is possible, because energy in the form of a bundle not only was witnessed here in the physical world, but then the scientists started employing it for the advancement of science. In most computers, highly complicated computers built in Japan, soliton is playing a very important central role. Instead of chips, they have made energy bundles which have neither a form, visible form, nor occupation of space somewhere. They don't know how they work, but they have known how to create them through electrical forces. And this is a common knowledge. I mean, this is not a religious view I am presenting to you. This is the most advanced scientific discovery in employment. So whatever is being discovered by the scientist is now beginning to raise its finger in the direction of a creator whose form, which was erstwhile not understood, is being understood in the sense that something could exist which we could not touch, which could not give a shape or anything which was directly accessible with the five human senses. So reading one of such articles, and this article definitely was published in the Scientific American, the last sentence is worth quoting. The writer, who was a Nobel laureate, as far as I remember, but I'll check up again, he at least was a scientist of great renown who wrote this article regarding new scientific discoveries leading to God. In the end, he said, around 200 years ago, when we took our journey into the investigation and exploration of nature, there sat some bearded religious people. They said, why do you do it? We tell you, all this, what you say, is because God created these things. So your inquiry is just a vain effort to discover something different. This is what you are going to discover. So he said, we pooh-poohed it and we laughed at it and we turned our backs to those people and said, no, we are going to explore the universe and find out what is behind it and who's behind it. He said, after 200 years, we have made a round circle back to the same place. And we found the same people sitting there telling us, did we not tell you? So it is not just a fiction, that's not just a piece of human imagination. If you study science with deeper and a profounder outlook, I assure you that you will come across so many instances where a scientist should have pointed out that these things could not have happened by chance. The simple question which would have been raised was that we can't do away with eternity. There is no way you can write off eternity. So what is this we find here? The form of existence. This form of existence, even if it evolved, is started from death. Total lack of consciousness, total lack of brain. It evolved, so it was not eternal. The matter was not eternal because it began with the Big Bang. So there has to be something eternal, because output is never greater than input. If there is no consciousness which pre-existed matter, then matter could never evolve into consciousness. All the laws of nature were there right from the start. Every split second the universe was expanding and the laws were being created, but they were the natural outcome of the existing laws. They were not new additions. Changes, forms, interplays created different things. But what is never put in cannot turn out at the outcome end. So if there is eternity, and we know we are not eternal, if there is eternity and we know that the physical existence of universe is not eternal, then eternity has to proceed. The only issue is whether eternity was conscious or unconscious. If it was unconscious, then the entire universe should have continued to evolve whatever way it would, under the direction of natural forces, but it would remain unconscious. If eternity was conscious, then of course consciousness would be the ultimate direction of the flow of things. So in short, it is that far that I can go, because otherwise the subject is so wide that it will occupy the whole space of this session and more. So I hope for the time being this will be sufficient, right? Thank you.